I still remember the moment I realized something had changed. It was not during a fight. It was not during a loud argument or harsh words. It was a quiet evening. I was standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup that had been simmering for a while. The house was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that feels heavy, like something unsaid was sitting between the walls. My husband walked past me, his eyes fixed on his phone, and I softly said his name. He did not hear me. Or maybe he did, but he did not turn. In that small moment, I felt invisible. Not angry, not shocked, just unseen. That was when I knew the love that once held us together had slowly slipped through his fingers. And somehow, I had let it happen without even realizing it. I did not cry that night. I finished cooking. I set the table. I served dinner the way I always did. But something inside me grew very quiet. I had spent years believing that love meant holding everything together. Being patient, being understanding, being strong enough for two people. I thought if I kept giving, if I kept sacrificing, love would stay alive. I was wrong. And this is the story of how I learned that lesson. Not in anger, not in hatred, but in silence. When I first met my husband, life felt simple. We were young, hopeful, and full of plans we believed would last forever. He was kind in ways that mattered then. He listened. He asked questions. He noticed small things about me, like how I liked my tea warm but not too hot. I felt seen back then. We did not have much money, but we had time. We talked for hours about dreams that felt close enough to touch. A home, a family, a future where we would grow old together, still holding hands. When we married, I promised myself I would give this life everything I had. And I did. I gave up a job I loved so we could move closer to his work. I told myself it was temporary. I would find something else later. But later kept moving further away. I adjusted my life around his schedule. I learned to cook his favorite meals. I learned to stay quiet when he was tired. I learned to smile when things did not go my way. At first, it felt like love. People praised me for being understanding, for being supportive, for being a good wife. And I believed them. Years passed quietly. Our home filled with routines instead of conversations. Morning coffee replaced deep talks. Shared calendars replaced shared dreams. We still lived together, but something softer had faded. I noticed it in small ways. He stopped asking how my day was. He stopped noticing when I was tired. He stopped saying my name the way he used to. But I told myself this was normal. This is what long marriages look like, I thought. Comfort. Routine. Familiar silence. So I stayed quiet. When he forgot anniversaries, I smiled and said it did not matter. When he canceled plans, I told myself he was busy. When he stopped reaching for my hand, I told myself he still loved me. I learned how to disappear slowly. I became the background noise of his life. The steady presence that never asked for attention. The person who made things easier, not deeper. And the more invisible I became, the more I tried to earn my place again. I cooked more. I listened more. I asked for less. I thought love could be saved by effort alone. But love also needs remembering. There were moments when I almost spoke up. Small moments.
Quelle chance.
Like when we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the sound of cutlery filling the space where conversation used to live. I would open my mouth, then close it again. What would I say? That I missed him? That I missed us? It felt selfish. He worked hard. He was tired. My feelings could wait. So I waited. And waiting became a habit. I waited for him to notice. I waited for him to ask. I waited for him to remember the woman who once mattered so deeply to him. But waiting does not bring people back. It only teaches them that your silence is
Permanent.
One evening, I sat alone in the living room while he worked late again. The lights were low. Rain tapped softly against the window. I remember looking at our wedding photo on the wall. We looked so hopeful, so close. I wondered when I had stopped feeling like that woman. The one with dreams. The one with opinions. The one who laughed freely. Somewhere along the way, I had turned into someone careful. Someone quiet. Someone who loved without asking to be loved back. That night, I felt a deep tiredness settle in my bones. Not the kind that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from giving too much for too long. Still, I told myself tomorrow would be better. It always starts with tomorrow. In the next part of my story, I will tell you about the small moments that slowly became impossible to ignore. The misunderstandings. The quiet hurt. The way love began to feel one-sided without either of us saying a word. Not all pain arrives loudly. Some of it arrives softly. And stays. The next morning began the way most mornings did. Quiet.
Familiar.
Predictable. I woke before him, as always. The house was still dark, the kind of darkness that feels safe because nothing has happened yet. I moved through the kitchen, on instinct. Boiling water. Bread in the toaster. 2 cups placed on the counter, even though I knew he would take his coffee in a hurry. I told myself these small acts still mattered. That love lived in routines. When he finally came into the kitchen, he nodded at me. Not unkindly.
Just briefly.
His mind was already somewhere else. I watched him drink his coffee while checking his phone, his fingers moving fast, his face focused on things I did not know. I stood there holding my own cup, waiting for something. A word. A glance. Anything. Nothing came. After he left for work, the house felt too big. Or maybe I felt too small inside it. I cleaned rooms that were already clean. I folded clothes that no one noticed. I kept myself busy, so I would not have
to sit with my thoughts.
This was how most days went. People often think loneliness comes from being alone. But I learned that loneliness can sit right next to you at the breakfast table and still feel just as heavy. When we first married, our home felt alive. We talked about everything. Dreams.
Fears.
Small plans for the weekend. Even silence felt warm then. Now, silence felt empty. I tried to remember when the shift happened. There was no clear moment. No single mistake. Just a slow drift. A quiet distance that grew without asking permission. I had supported his career with pride. I believed in him. I rearranged my life so his could move forward smoothly. I told myself we were a team. But somewhere along the way, the team became one person running and the other standing still, cheering quietly from the side. I did not realize how tired I was until one afternoon, while folding laundry, I suddenly sat down on the bed and stared at the wall. My hands stopped moving. My chest felt tight. I was not sad. I was not crying. I was empty. That scared me more than tears ever could. I started noticing patterns I had once ignored. He spoke about his work with excitement, but when I spoke about my day, his eyes drifted. He answered with short words. Polite words. Safe words. That's nice.
Sounds fine.
We'll talk later. Later rarely came. I stopped sharing the small details of my life. There was no space for them anymore. They felt like clutter in a room already full. Sometimes, at night, I would turn toward him in bed, wanting to say something. Anything. But he was already asleep. Or pretending to be. So I lay there quietly, listening to his breathing, wondering how 2 people could sleep so close and feel so far apart. There were moments when he still showed care. He was not cruel. He never raised his voice. He never said harsh words. That made everything harder. Because how do you explain pain that comes from absence, not abuse? How do you ask for something when nothing is technically wrong? So I stayed quiet. I told myself I was lucky. Others had it worse. My life was stable, comfortable, predictable. But comfort without connection is a quiet kind of ache. One weekend, I suggested we go for a walk together like we used to. Just around the neighborhood. Nothing special. Maybe later, he said, without looking up.
I'm tired.
I nodded. Of course he was tired. I went alone. The air was cool. Leaves crunched under my feet. Couples passed by, talking, laughing softly. I felt like a ghost moving through someone else's life. I realized then that I had been adjusting myself for years, shrinking gently so I would not ask for too much. I wondered when my needs had become an inconvenience. That evening, I cooked his favorite meal. It was something I did often when I wanted to feel close again. Food was my language of love. He ate quietly. He thanked me. He went back to his phone. I watched him from across the table and felt something shift inside me. A soft understanding, painful but clear. He did not mean to forget me. He simply no longer had to remember. I had made it easy. I thought about the woman I used to be. The one who laughed louder. The one who had opinions. The one who believed her presence mattered. I missed her. But I also felt afraid to bring her back. What if he did not like her anymore? What if speaking up made things worse? So I stayed where I was. Safe.
Quiet.
Unseen. In the next part of my story, the small hurts will begin to stack up. The moments I could no longer explain away. The silence that started to feel heavier than any argument ever could. Because silence, when it goes on too long, becomes its own kind of truth. The days continued to move forward, one after another, each one looking very much like the last. From the outside, our life appeared calm, peaceful, even, but inside me, something was slowly tightening. It was not one big thing that caused it. It was many small things, little moments that stayed with me longer than they should have. Like the afternoon, I tried to tell him about a letter I received from an old friend. We had not spoken in years. I felt a brief spark of happiness reading it, a reminder of who I used to be. I began to tell him about it while he sat on the couch. He said, eyes still on the screen. I stopped mid-sentence. He did not notice. That was when I realized I was talking to fill space, not to be heard. I started paying attention to how often this happened, how often my words faded into the background. I noticed how easily conversations ended when they were about me. When he spoke, I listened. I always had. I still did. When I spoke, the room felt impatient. I told myself not to take it personally. He was busy. He had responsibilities. Life was demanding. But my heart did not understand logic the way my mind tried to. One evening, while washing dishes, I broke a glass by accident. It slipped from my hand and shattered in the sink. The sound was sharp and sudden. He looked up from the other room. "Be careful," he said. That was all. I stood there, staring at the broken pieces, my hands shaking slightly. Not because of the glass, but because of how small that moment felt and how much it hurt anyway. I realized then that I had started hoping for concern in places where it no longer lived. I began to feel tired in a way I could not explain. My body was fine, but my spirit felt heavy. Simple tasks took more effort. Smiling felt like work. Some days, I caught myself rehearsing conversations in my head. What I would say if I finally spoke honestly, did I feel lonely? I miss you. I need more. But the words stayed inside. I was afraid of what might happen if I said them out loud. Afraid of being dismissed. Afraid of being told I was overthinking things. So I swallowed them. We attended a family gathering one weekend. Everyone was laughing, talking over one another, filling the room with noise. He seemed lighter there, more present. I watched him joke with others, tell stories, smile in a way I had not seen directed at me in a long time. Someone asked him how we were doing. "Good," he said easily. "All good." I smiled and nodded beside him. No one asked me. That was when it hit me. Even in a room full of people, I felt alone. On the drive home, the car was quiet. The road stretched ahead of us, long and dark.
I wanted to say something.
Anything. Instead, I asked a small question. A safe one. "Did you have a nice time?" "Yes," he replied. "You?" "Yes," I said. It was a lie, but it felt easier than the truth. At home, I went into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I stared at my hands, at the small lines and marks that told stories of years spent caring, cleaning, giving. I wondered when my life had become so quiet inside. I thought about all the times I had chosen peace over honesty. All the times I had told myself it was not worth bringing up. I began to see a pattern. Each time I stayed silent, the distance grew. Each time I adjusted myself, I disappeared a little more. There was a moment, one night, that stayed with me. We were lying in bed. The lights were off. The room was still. I turned toward him and softly said his name. Yes, he answered, without turning. I just wanted to say, I paused. He waited. I felt my courage slip away. Never mind, I said. Okay, he replied. And that was it. That small exchange broke something in me. Not loudly, quietly, like a thread snapping inside fabric that had already worn thin. I realized then that I had trained him not to hear me. After that night, something inside me changed. I became more aware, more awake. I noticed how often my needs came last, how often I excused behavior that hurt me, how often I told myself this was just how life was supposed to feel. But I also felt a growing sadness, a grief for the love we used to share, for the closeness we once had without trying. I missed being chosen. The silence between us started to feel heavier than words ever could. It followed us from room to room. It sat with us at meals. It slept beside us at night. I began to wonder how long a person could live this way before something had to give. I did not know it then, but I was moving closer to a moment that would force me to see the truth clearly. A moment I could no longer ignore. Some realizations arrive slowly. Others arrive all at once. And mine was coming. The moment that changed everything did not come with shouting or tears. It came the way most truths do in long marriages. Quietly. Unexpectedly. Without asking permission. It was an ordinary weekday evening. I remember because nothing about it felt important at the time. The sky outside was dull and gray, the kind of evening that feels unfinished. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through a small pile of papers. Bills. Notes. Things that needed attention. He came home later than usual. I heard the door open, then close. His footsteps moved through the house with purpose, like he already had a plan that did not include me. Dinner's ready, I said softly. In a minute, he replied. That minute stretched into half an hour. I waited. When he finally sat down, he ate quickly. His phone sat beside his plate. It lit up often. He glanced at it more than he looked at me. I felt something tighten in my chest. I don't know what gave me the courage to speak that night. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the quiet buildup of too many unspoken days. I cleared my throat. Can I ask you something? I said. He nodded, still chewing. Do you ever miss this? I asked. He paused. Just for a moment. Then he shrugged. We're fine, he said. Why are you asking this now? The words were simple. Calm. Reasonable. But they landed hard. I just feel like we don't talk anymore, I said gently. Like I'm not really here. He sighed. You're overthinking, he said. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. I had heard those words before. Many times. They always ended the conversation. But this time, they didn't sit right. I don't feel remembered, I said quietly. I feel like I've become part of the routine, not part of your life.
He looked at me then.
Really looked. And what I saw on his face hurt more than anger ever could. Confusion. I don't know what you want me to say, he said. You're always here. Of course you matter. Always here. That was it. In that moment, I understood something I had been avoiding for years. I was not cherished. I was convenient. Something inside me finally cracked open. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just clearly. I realized I had given so much of myself away that there was very little left for him to notice. I had made my presence so steady, so quiet, so dependable, that it blended into the walls. He did not forget me because he didn't care. He forgot me because I stopped asking to be seen. That night after we went to bed, I did not sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. The ticking clock. The soft hum of the fan. I thought about all the years I had said it's okay when it wasn't. All the times I had swallowed words to keep peace. All the moments I had chosen comfort over truth. I saw myself clearly for the first time in a long while. And I felt a deep sadness. Not just for what I had lost, but for what I had allowed. The next morning, I did something small but important. I did not rush. I sat at the table with my coffee and let myself feel everything. The disappointment, the grief, the quiet strength. Do you ever miss this? I asked. He paused. Just for a moment. Then he shrugged. We're fine, he said. Why are you asking this now? The words were simple,
Calm.
reasonable, but they landed hard. I just feel like we don't talk anymore, I said gently. Like I'm not really here. He sighed. You're overthinking, he said. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. I had heard those words before. Many times. They always ended the conversation. But this time, they didn't sit right. I don't feel remembered, I said quietly. I feel like I've become part of the routine, not part of your life.
He looked at me then.
Really looked. And what I saw on his face hurt more than anger ever could.
Confusion.
I don't know what you want me to say, he said. You're always here. Of course you matter. Always here. That was it. In that moment, I understood something I had been avoiding for years. I was not cherished. I was convenient. Something inside me finally cracked open. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just clearly. I realized I had given so much of myself away that there was very little left for him to notice. I had made my presence so steady, so quiet, so dependable, that it blended into the walls. He did not forget me because he didn't care. He forgot me because I stopped asking to be seen. That night, after we went to bed, I did not sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house. The ticking clock. The soft hum of the fan. I thought about all the years I had said it's okay when it wasn't. All the times I had swallowed words to keep peace. All the moments I had chosen comfort over truth. I saw myself clearly for the first time in a long while, and I felt a deep sadness, not just for what I had lost, but for what I had allowed. The next morning, I did something small but important. I did not rush. I sat at the table with my coffee and let myself feel everything. The disappointment, the grief, the quiet strength underneath it all. When he came into the kitchen, I looked at him differently. Not with blame, not with anger, but with honesty. I think I lost myself, I said simply. He frowned. What do you mean? I gave so much of who I was away, I said. I don't think either of us noticed. He was silent. I did not push. I did not explain further. For the first time in years, I allowed my words to stand without apology. That day, something shifted between us. It was subtle but real. The silence felt different. Less empty. More aware. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if things could be repaired. But I knew one thing with certainty. I could no longer disappear to keep things comfortable. In the next part of my story, I will share what happened after that realization. How I began to reclaim myself. How healing started, slowly, imperfectly, honestly. Because sometimes the hardest part is not being forgotten by someone else. It is remembering yourself. After that morning, nothing changed all at once. There was no sudden apology. No emotional conversation that fixed everything. But something had shifted inside me. I stopped rushing to fill the silence. I stopped explaining myself when I spoke. I began to move through the house with a different awareness, as if I were finally present in my own life. I noticed how often I had been bending myself to fit around his comfort. I noticed how natural it had become to place my needs last, without even questioning it. That realization stayed with me. I began making small changes. Quiet ones. The kind that don't ask for permission. I took longer walks. I sat in the park and watched people pass by. I let myself feel the sun on my face without thinking about what still needed to be done at home. At first, it felt strange, almost wrong, like I was breaking an unspoken rule. But slowly, it began to feel honest. My husband noticed the changes, even if he did not say so at first. He noticed I no longer hovered, no longer adjusted myself around his moods. I spoke when I had something to say, and stayed quiet when I didn't. One evening, he asked, "Are you okay?" It was a simple question, but it was the first time in a long while that it felt real. I'm figuring things out, I said. He nodded. He did not push. That was new. We began talking more. Not deeply at first. Just small, careful conversations. Honest ones. I told him how tired I had been. How lonely I had felt. Not accusing. Just truthful. He listened. Awkwardly.
Slowly.
But he listened. I didn't know, he said once. I know, I replied. I didn't tell you. That was hard to admit. But it was true. Some nights, we still sat in silence. But it no longer felt like absence. It felt like space. Space where something could grow, if we let it. I started doing things for myself again. Things I had set aside long ago. Reading in the afternoon. Writing small thoughts in a notebook. Listening to music just because I wanted to. I felt parts of myself waking up. Not loudly.
Gently.
Healing did not come from him suddenly changing. It came from me remembering that I existed. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was. I stopped believing that love had to be earned through sacrifice alone. One afternoon, while sitting at the kitchen table, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I was choosing myself. My husband and I are still learning. Some days are easier than others. Some habits take time to unlearn.
But there is more awareness now.
More honesty. He asks how I am. I answer truthfully. I ask for what I need. And sometimes he listens better than before. Not perfectly, but sincerely. I no longer disappear to keep peace. I no longer stay silent to avoid discomfort. I have learned that love should not make you smaller. It should make room for you. And if it doesn't, you must make that room yourself. In the final part, I will share what all of this taught me. The quiet lesson that stayed with me long after the pain softened. Because some love stories are not about staying or leaving. They are about remembering who you are. As I look back now, I no longer see those years as wasted. I see them as years of learning. Years where I loved deeply, even when I forgot to love myself. I understand now that I was not wrong for giving. I was wrong for believing that giving meant disappearing. There is a difference. I used to think love was about holding everything together, no matter the cost. About staying quiet so things would stay calm. About making myself small so others could feel comfortable. But love should not require you to forget who you are. Real love notices when you are tired. It listens when you speak. It pauses when you pull away. And when it doesn't, you are allowed to stop and ask why. I am still married. We are still learning each other again, slowly, carefully. Some days, we talk more than we used to. Some days, silence still sits between us. But the silence is no longer empty. It is honest. I no longer wait to be seen. I no longer measure my worth by how useful I am to someone else's life. I have learned to sit with myself, to listen to my own voice, to honor the parts of me that were once set aside. And in doing so, something beautiful happened. I became visible again.
Not just to him,
but to myself. If you are listening to this and feel forgotten, please know this. You do not have to disappear to be loved. You do not have to stay silent to keep the peace. Your presence matters. Your feelings matter. Your life matters. Sometimes, the love that saves us is not the love we receive.